Imagine this. Harvard University, one of the world's most prestigious names, suddenly facing, well, a massive financial blockade.
We're not talking small change here either.
No, definitely not. We're talking billions. It's April 2025, and the Trump administration has just frozen $2.2 billion in federal grants.
And there are contracts too, right? About $60 million?
Exactly. Another $60 million in contracts just halted. It's not hypothetical. It's happening right now.
Wow. So the immediate question is, okay, why? Is this like a necessary crackdown on real campus problems, or is it something else?
Something like maybe an overreach, potentially stepping on academic freedom. That's really the core tension here.
Absolutely. It's this massive financial move, and you have to ask, what's the justification versus what's the impact?
Right, and we've gone through the official letters, the back and forth. We've looked at the legal arguments taking shape.
And I bet some of the demands themselves are interesting.
Oh, definitely head-scratching. We even found ourselves, chuckling grimly at a few points.
Yeah.
It's quite something.
So forget just the dry news headlines.
Yeah, we're diving deeper into the what, the why, and honestly, some of the surprisingly quirky details of this whole high-stakes showdown.
Okay, let's start with the big freeze itself. What exactly did the government do, that Friday letter?
Right. Friday, April 11th, 2025. This letter arrives at Harvard, and it's not asking nicely. It's a formal notice from the federal government.
Saying what specifically? Just stop.
Pretty much. An immediate halt to that $2.2 billion in grants and the $60 million in contracts. Just frozen.
That kind of money. It's a lifeblood for so much research, right? Student aid, faculty.
Oh, absolutely. Major research, countless people supported. It's huge. The impact is potentially enormous.
So what reasons did they actually give in the letter for such a drastic step?
Well, the official line pointed to what they called unchecked activism on Harvard's campus.
Unchecked activism. That sounds broad.
It is broad. It could mean almost anything, depending on who you ask. Legitimate protests for some, something else for others.
Very open-ended. And, okay, within that broad accusation, what were the specific things they demanded Harvard actually do?
Right, the letter wasn't just a complaint. It came with a list of demands. Non-negotiables, basically.
Like what?
Top of the list, a complete overhaul of admissions and hiring policies. How Harvard decides who gets in and who gets hired.
Wow, okay. So not just tweaking things, a fundamental change to their core operations.
Exactly. It suggests a real deep disagreement with how Harvard has been doing things for a long time.
And it didn't stop there, I gather.
No, it gave more intrusive, you could say. They also demanded Harvard conduct an ideological audit.
An ideological audit?
Of who? Of students and faculty, to basically assess their views.
That sets off major alarm bells, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Academic freedom, freedom of thought.
Big time. Imagine being compelled to survey the political beliefs of your entire campus community. It feels, well, a bit Orwellian.
It really does. You risk people self-censoring, being afraid to voice certain opinions. Undermines the whole point of a university, arguably.
Definitely. And then there was the one demand that just seemed to come out of left field.
I think I know where you're going with this.
The face mask ban. Right alongside these huge demands about policy and ideology, they insist Harvard bans face masks on campus.
It just feels odd, doesn't it? Almost tacked on.
Completely surreal. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, no masks.
If you try to piece it together, though, the speculation is it connects back to the protests, maybe. Pro-Palestinian protests from the year before.
It's the common theory, yeah. The idea being that masks hide identities during demonstrations.
So make it harder to protest anonymously, essentially.
Seems to be the logic, or at least the assumed logic.
Which then maybe connects to the final big demand about student groups.
Right. The letter also said Harvard had to stop recognizing or funding any student groups that, and this is their phrasing, endorse or promote criminal activity, illegal violence, or illegal harassment.
Okay, on the surface, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Universities shouldn't fund illegal stuff.
In principle, sure. No argument there. But like unchecked activism, the devil's in the details.
Exactly. Who defines criminal activity or illegal harassment in this context? What's the threshold?
Is it the university's existing code of conduct? Or is the federal government now making those calls based on, potentially political interpretations?
It's ambiguous. And that ambiguity could be used to target groups based on their viewpoints, couldn't it? Not just actual illegal acts.
That's the worry. A potential chilling effect on student activism across the board.
Okay, so that's the government side. A pretty forceful set of demands. How did Harvard react? Did they just cave?
Not at all. Just a few days later, that Monday, Harvard's president, Alan Garber, sent back a pretty firm letter, a strong rebuttal.
Pushing back directly.
Absolutely. Made it very clear they weren't just going to comply, they challenged the whole premise.
And what were their main arguments? How did they justify pushing back?
Garber really focused on core principles. First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association. He argued the demands infringed on those.
Okay, constitutional grounds. What else?
He also leaned heavily on Title VI limitations. The law about discrimination based on race, color, national origin in federally funded programs.
Right, the basis the administration was presumably using to exert pressure.
Exactly. But Harvard's argument was, look, Title VI is about preventing discrimination. It doesn't give the government power to dictate everything like curriculum, admissions policies, beyond non-discrimination, or who we hire, generally.
So they're saying the government is using a specific tool for a purpose it wasn't designed for?
Pretty much, like using a wrench as a hammer. Garber put it very bluntly in his letter, actually.
What did he say?
Something like, no government, regardless of who's in charge, should dictate what private universities teach, who they admit, or what they study.
Wow. That's drawing a very clear line in the sand. A declaration of independence, almost.
Definitely. Defending the university's autonomy as a place for independent learning and research.
Okay, let's circle back to that mask ban again. It just seems so specific. Is there maybe more going on than just protest anonymity concerns?
Well, you have to think about the whole history of masks, right? Especially post-pandemic. They became such a symbol.
A real lightning rod. Public health versus personal freedom, all that.
Exactly. So demanding a mask ban on a campus, especially in the context of protests, it taps into those wider cultural and political fights. It's not just about seeing faces.
That's a good point. It could be partly symbolic, aligning with a certain political stance on mandates and individual choice.
Could be. And then there's just the sheer impracticality of it. A blanket ban? What about, say, flu season? Or students who are immunocompromised?
Or even, like you hinted before, theatrical performances. What if they're doing Phantom of the Opera?
Right. Does the government step in and say, sorry, Phantom, mask off? It just seems wildly disproportionate as a response to protest concerns.
A sledgehammer to crack a nut, perhaps? And maybe not even the right nut.
Well put. Now, this whole Harvard situation, it isn't happening in a vacuum, is it? Other universities are feeling similar pressure.
That's right. Harvard's may be the biggest headline, but it seems to be part of a wider pattern.
Yeah, the administration has apparently paused funding or initiated reviews for other Ivies, too. Penn, Brown, Princeton.
And Columbia took some actions earlier, didn't they? Possibly to avoid this kind of thing.
That's the understanding, yeah. It suggests a coordinated approach, not just a one-off issue with Harvard.
And the common thread, the administration's main argument across these cases.
It generally comes back to concerns about how these universities handled campus protests related to the Gaza conflict last year. Specifically, the charge is that they were too soft on what the administration calls anti-Semitism.
The claim being that these campuses became hostile environments for Jewish students.
That's the core accusation. Now, the universities, including Harvard, they push back on that narrative. They emphasize steps they've already taken to combat hate speech, to maintain campus order. Harvard specifically mentioned reforms they'd put in place to tackle anti-Semitism.
But they want to do it on their own terms.
Exactly. Guided by academic principles, not under direct federal mandate tied to billions of dollars. It's a clash over who decides and how.
A fundamental disagreement about authority in the academic sphere. So how has the Harvard community itself reacted? Alumni, students, faculty?
The reaction seems pretty strong, and mostly back in the university's position. Alumni, for instance, mobilized really quickly.
What did they do?
Sent a letter urging the leadership to stand your ground, called demands unlawful. There's a sense that giving in would be a dangerous precedent.
Any standout quotes from that?
Yeah, one alum, Anurama Pargava, said something powerful. Learning and innovation don't bow to bullying. Really captures the sentiment.
Strong words. And beyond alumni letters, any action on campus?
Oh yeah, there have been student and faculty protests in Cambridge, demonstrations supporting the university's autonomy, defending academic freedom. It's quite visible.
And the most direct challenge, legally speaking. There's a lawsuit now, right?
Yes. The American Association of University Professors, the AAUP, didn't waste any time. They filed a lawsuit the same Friday the freeze was announced.
Targeting the administration's actions directly, what's the legal basis for their suit?
They're arguing the administration broke the rules, basically. Violated Title VI procedures by not giving proper notice. They claim The law requires informing both Harvard and Congress properly before pulling funding like this, and that didn't happen. It's a procedural challenge.
So it's about how the government did it, not just what they demanded.
That's a key part of it. The lawsuit calls the demands sweeping yet indeterminate, echoing that vagueness we talked about.
And it accuses the administration of
Essentially, using Title VI as a pretext, using an anti-discrimination law to push a political agenda rather than addressing actual proven discrimination according to the law's standards.
a politically motivated action disguised as legal enforcement, in their view.
That's the core argument of the AAUP lawsuit.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to one of those specific demands, the call for merit-based admissions and hiring. That phrase sounds good, right? Merit.
It sounds perfectly reasonable on the surface. Who argues against merit?
But it's become such a loaded term, especially in higher education debates. It's tangled up with affirmative action, diversity, inclusion.
Exactly. What is merit? Is it just test scores and grades? Or is it more complex? How do you account for different backgrounds, experiences, overcoming obstacles?
Critics worry that a narrow definition of merit base, often pushed in these contexts, is really a way to roll back diversity efforts, that it could ignore systemic inequalities.
Right. They argue that relying only on traditional metrics might not capture the full potential or contribution someone could bring, leading to less diverse student bodies and faculties.
On the flip side, proponents argue it is about fairness, rewarding individual achievement based on objective qualifications, creating a level playing field regardless of background.
It's a long-standing debate with deeply held views on both sides. But here's where the administration's demand gets particularly thorny.
Go on.
They didn't just say use merit-based criteria. They also demanded that audit of the views of students, faculty, and leaders on diversity itself.
Ah, right. Not just assessing qualifications, but assessing opinions about diversity.
Exactly. It moves way beyond evaluating skills or potential into scrutinizing personal beliefs. How do you even measure that? Grade someone's opinion on diversity.
It sounds incredibly problematic, raises huge questions about intellectual freedom, freedom of conscience. You risk creating an environment where people are afraid to even discuss these topics openly.
It feels less like fostering academic debate and more like trying to enforce a specific viewpoint, which is really counter to what universities are supposed to be about.
Okay, so given all this complexity, the demands, the rebuttals, the legal fights, let's just quickly fact-check the main points floating around.
Good idea. So the money, $2.2 billion in grants, $60 million in contracts frozen. Those figures seem solid, reported by both sides.
And the date of the initial letter, April 11th, 2025, confirmed.
Yep. The legal justification cited, Title VI. As we discussed, it's about discrimination based on race, color, national origin. Harvard argues it's being overextended.
The mask ban, weird, but definitely in the letter.
Correct. And the context is important. The campus protests in 2024, the administration's focus on alleged anti-Semitism. Federal reports did cite incidents, around 47 nationally, apparently.
And Harvard has acknowledged the issue and reported making reforms to address anti-Semitism.
Yes, they have, which makes the administration's drastic action, the full freeze, the central point of contention. Is it proportional? Is it legal?
Right. And that merit-based demand still lacks specific criteria from the administration side. It's more of a loaded phrase right now.
And finally, this isn't just about Harvard. We know similar pressure is being applied to Penn, Brown, Princeton. It's a pattern.
Definitely seems like a broader strategy targeting certain institutions. So that brings us to the big question. Why should someone listening who maybe didn't go to Harvard or isn't involved in academia, why should they care about this?
That's crucial, because it's easy to see this as just an ivory tower issue, but it's really not.
How so?
Well, first, think about the research. That $2.2 billion funds a lot of science, medicine, technology development, things like cancer research, climate change studies.
Research that eventually benefits everyone, right? Not just Harvard students.
Exactly. Delays or cuts to that funding because of this freeze could slow down progress that impacts public health, the economy, our future. It reaches far beyond Cambridge.
That's a very tangible impact. What else?
There's the bigger question about control over education in America. If the federal government can use funding to dictate policies this aggressively at a major private university.
What precedent does that set? Could similar tactics be used elsewhere? State universities, community colleges, even K-12 schools down the line.
It opens that door. It's about the balance between government oversight and the independence of educational institutions to decide what they teach and research.
And crucially, what about free speech? Academic freedom.
That's perhaps the most fundamental point. Universities are supposed to be places for open debate, exploring difficult ideas, even unpopular ones.
If the government starts penalizing universities financially based on the kinds of speech or activism happening on campus or the views of faculty,
It could create a real chilling effect. People might shy away from sensitive topics, from challenging established ideas, from voicing dissent. That weakens the core mission of a university.
regardless of your stance on the specific protests, the principle of protecting open inquiry and expression within universities is vital for a healthy democracy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. If the government gets to decide what's acceptable discourse on campus, where does that slippery slope lead?
So what we're really seeing here is much bigger than Harvard versus the administration. It's a battle over power, over
It's
principles.
over the future of independent academic inquiry in the U.S. And yes, some parts are just plain weird.
Like the mask ban. Still can't quite get over that one.
Or the ideological audit, assessing views on diversity. It feels so intrusive and strange in this context.
It really highlights how far the administration seems willing to go to influence not just policy, but the internal culture of the university.
So where do things stand now? Harvard's pushing back hard,
The AAUP lawsuit is underway, challenging the legality of the freeze.
and that massive amount of funding, billions for research, aid, operations, is just hanging in the balance. The outcome is totally uncertain right now.
Will Harvard withstand the pressure? Will the courts side with the AAUP? Will there be some kind of compromise? We just don't know yet.
But as this plays out, it's worth keeping those broader questions in mind.
Absolutely. What does this showdown really mean for the independence of our universities, our colleges, long term? What principles are truly worth defending here?
And what are the potential ripple effects of this financial freeze, this whole conflict, no matter who ultimately wins this particular round?
These are the big questions that go way beyond Harvard Yard. It's something that impacts the very nature of education and inquiry for years to come.
Definitely something to keep watching and thinking about.
Yeah.
So we encourage you, our listeners, stay informed, maybe dig a little deeper yourselves. It's complex.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a really significant and unfolding situation.